Hi everyone, I hope you all are doing well. So today we'll be covering Social Stratification Unit 3, and just a reminder that I'll be doing a crash course. So in this I'll be covering all concepts but very briefly and some of them in detail. So I hope at the end of the video you get an understanding of what the chapter is and how you are going to answer each question. We begin with what is social stratification. So social stratification literally means it is a hierarchy in which groups have different statuses and privileges. And to get a better understanding of this definition, I'd like to introduce you to different forms of stratification and their examples. So there are 4 different forms of stratification that I've mentioned here. There's class, gender, age, ethnicity/race. So in class, you see that if you apply this concept to your real life, so you see that in class we have different forms of people are stratified based on their economic background. So we see that there are people who are landowners, okay? So they belong to the elite class. Then there are working class people, and then there are underclass people too. So underclass people are people who belong to the underclass are the one who do not work, who live in a poverty cycle, who are unemployed. And working class people are the ones who are working in factories or in other or as laborers. And then we also have another class that is middle class. So these are basically intellectuals, doctors, engineers, lawyers. So these are the people who belong to the middle class. So you have a hierarchy. You have a stratified system beginning from the elite to the middle to the working to the underclass. Okay, so we have also divided ourselves according to age. So there are adults, there are children, and then there are old people. Okay, and then on the basis of gender, this is a very mainstream topic, and we all know how people have a stratified system. How we have a stratified system on the basis of gender. So there are males, females, and there are transgenders. On the gender spectrum, you see that males are the ones who are occupying a more superior position than females, okay? Because they do not have the equality of opportunity, or they're suffering from a double burden or a triple burden. Or transgenders are the ones who are not being accepted into society as they should, because they're not even considered as humans. They're mocked, they are given low paid jobs, and they are considered, and they're just living at the margins of the society. Earlier I said triple and double burden, so I'll be explaining that in the slides ahead. And then we have to move on to racial stratification, that is done on the basis of race, where people are divided on the basis of their skin color. So you have black people or you have white people. A very good example could be the apartheid period in South Africa, when blacks were not given the similar equality of opportunity as their white counterparts. They had to sit in, for example, if they had to travel from one area to another, so in buses, blacks were segregated from whites. Their seats were segregated from whites, or even in schools or even in workplaces. So you see how people are divided on the basis of race, but they're not given equality of opportunity, similar equality of opportunity, you'd say, in different sectors of their life or different affairs of their life, in the education, in the transport, in the workforce. So you see people are divided on the basis of their race or their gender or their age or their class. Okay, so now moving on with some important terms that you need to understand before understanding other concepts of this chapter. So first is ascribed status. Ascribed status is the status that you inherit when you're born. So for example, your age, your class, your ethnicity. All these things cannot be changed. You just inherit them. You belong to an upper class. It's because your father is rich. You belong to a working class. It's because your father is working as a laborer, or your mother is working as a laborer, right? Or your mother has a lot of wealth. So it can be both ways. And age, you cannot change your age. You grow up, and obviously with that your age gets changed. Yeah, so the ascribed status is something that you inherit and it cannot be changed. But on the other hand, achieved status is something that is earned, that is achieved, like the term says. So for example, you go to a school, you get education, and you land at a certain job. You work at a multinational job, for example, and that is your achieved status. You earn a certain salary, that is, you achieve that status. For example, you become a prefect of a class, or you become a president of a society. That's your achieved status, that you have achieved that certain thing out of your own hard work. Get it? Okay, so now we move on to life chances. So like I previously said, that there are different forms of stratification. There is class, race, ethnicity, and gender, and all these social factors affect your life chances. So literally, life chances are your life opportunities that you can avail to get more benefits. For example, a person belonging to a elite background, a person who's male, who's belonging to a elite background and who is white, will have more life chances than a person who's belonging to a working class and who's black and who belongs to and who is a female. So obviously these factors determine your life chances in the society. Then we have life expectancy. So life expectancy literally means the average life expectancy of a society, the average living years that you can stay on this earth, really. So you have, for example, in Pakistan, we see that 16 is the average age. Yeah, life expectancy is just the average number of years that you can live on this earth. Lastly, we have this term social mobility, and social mobility literally means movement between classes. So you move from working class to an upper class, and the different factors that can aid you in this mobility. So there are different types of mobility. I'm talking about upward mobility, that is you update your status or you increase your status. So different factors, for example, your education, promotion or your career advancement, marrying a person with a different class, or changes in wealth. For example, you win lottery. All these factors can aid you in updating your status. This is upward mobility. And so what I was talking about earlier is upward mobility. Now there are other types of mobility too. There is downward mobility as well. So in downward mobility, you move from upper class to working class. And this can happen due to a lot of factors. So for example, if somebody goes bankrupt or there are a lot of loans on them, so obviously they'll go bankrupt and all their assets are going to be wasted. They have no value. So then they obviously their financial position is going to change and they're going to move to the working class. Okay, then there are two other types of mobility as well. There is intergenerational mobility. This is between generations. A child gets educated and more skilled compared to fathers. So there is intergeneration. For example, there is a person who is a child of a laborer who works at a brick kiln. And he basically completes their education and he aces the CSS exam and he becomes an officer. So obviously their status is going to change. So that's intergenerational mobility. And then we're moving on to intragenerational. So intragenerational is when belonging to a same class and your status gets updated, status gets improved, or you get promoted to a different position. For example, a working class person is promoted to a manager. For example, a teacher becomes a coordinator and then becomes a principal and then opens their own school. So that's the intragenerational mobility. It does not happen between generations. It is within that same generation. But intergenerational is between generations. So I hope you get the difference here. There are different point of views about social mobility. So according to functionalists, they say that system is meritocratic, which means that every decision is taken on the basis of merit. So either you belong to any class. These social factors do not determine your mobility. For example, age, class, ethnicity, race. The system works regardless of these social factors. So if you work hard, then you're going to achieve more. So they believe in the idea of merit and meritocracy. Then you're going to achieve more and more. But on the other hand, Marxists are the one who say no, the upper class have more life chances because they have more social capital, financial capital at their hand. For example, they send the children to good schools and then the good universities. So obviously they land at good jobs and they have all these assets, so they're given a greater advantage than a child who's coming from a working class because they do not have all these benefits. Then there are feminists who say that social mobility is more favorable for men because because this is a men's world and they are given an edge of getting better jobs, of getting better school, of getting to better school. So they are the ones who are going to going to be benefited by the system. So for them, social mobility works best, but for women, they are discriminated, they're prejudiced, there's gender inequality. So that is why for them, social mobility, it does not happen very easily for them. Yeah. Okay, so if you're on the topic of social stratification or on the topic of understanding these different terms, ascribed, achieved, life chances, or life expectancy or social mobility, then we also need to understand that from these terms we we condense out a term that is known as social inequality. And social inequality, in order to understand social inequality, you need to understand two sub-themes that contribute to this term, that is wealth and income. So wealth is something that you have in the form that you say that you store it, but that store has an economic value. And for store, I'd say, for example, you have land, you have stocks, you have share, and that can be, and for example, when you have a land and you decide to sell it, obviously then you are going to get lots of money out of that. So that's your wealth, but you do not have this in liquidified form. Liquidified means in the form of money, but it can be liquidified if you wish to sell it. So it has an economic value. And then you have income. So income literally means the monthly or daily earnings that you get. For example, for a person who is doing a job, they'll get these monthly incomes, and for a laborer who's working at a daily basis, they may get daily income or they may get monthly income. Yeah. Now we're moving on to a very important idea of this topic, which is poverty. And like we all know, poverty is when you cannot fulfill your basic needs. This is what everybody understands by the term poverty. And we're going to explore two types of poverty over here. So over here, we're going to make poverty more complex, and we're going to explore two types of poverty. So there is absolute poverty and there is relative poverty. Absolute poverty is when you cannot fulfill your basic necessities of life, which is food, water, shelter. And relative poverty, I'll explain you in a bit, but about absolute poverty, I want to tell you that absolute poverty is when you live below the poverty line. So what is poverty line? Poverty line is when the level of income is below which people are poor. So you cannot meet your basic necessities of life. You do not have a house to live in. You do not have clothes to wear. You do not have water to drink. You do not have food to eat. So this is when you live in absolute poverty, when you cannot fulfill your basic necessities of life. And about the relative poverty, okay, so relative poverty stems up from capitalism and consumerism. So with time, when industry started producing more, when you had a lot of choices, when people started to, when the richer became richer and the poorer became poorer, so the richer had more options, they were consuming a lot. So for example, you go to a mall, you have 100 different brands of clothes, and you want to buy everything. So our wishes and our desires and our happiness were being determined by what brands we are wearing, which car we are driving, or what kind of phone we have. So you call this conspicuous consumption. So you call this conspicuous consumption. So with this idea of conspicuous, so conspicuous consumption literally means when you buy things for the sake of showing off. For example, you are driving a Mercedes, it's for the sake that it's for the sake that you want to show it off to people that I'm so rich and I can buy this Mercedes. So with the idea of conspicuous consumption, people, even though a person who was living in a 4-canal bungalow, who had a Mercedes, who was sending the children to the best of the schools in town, still considered themselves poor. Why? Because they were comparing themselves to a person who had a 10-canal bungalow, who had 2 Land Cruisers, who was sending the children to abroad. And so the relative poverty came with the idea of consumerism, conspicuous consumption, and really with the idea of comparing yourself. For example, a person who's driving a Suzuki may consider themselves poor to a person who's driving a Corolla because they do not have a Corolla. So you see, conspicuous consumption and relative poverty is when you compare yourself to the other person. Moving on to the causes of poverty, here we all know that's very mainstream. We all may have heard in news. This is a very mainstream topic over here in Pakistan. So poverty is common to us, and we all have seen poverty over here. So main cause is illiteracy, because you all know when a child will not go to school, they'll obviously not earn good, and they'll work as low menial laborers. First of all, the root cause of poverty is illiteracy. When a child will not go to school, they cannot get high paid jobs, so they'll obviously work like their father and then in that same position. And then there is unemployment. Similarly, if a person who is illiterate, they may obviously find hard to get good jobs, so some of them may remain unemployed. So basically it traps you into a poverty cycle. So poverty cycle and the cycle of poverty trap and the cycle of poverty are interconnected terms, for me at least. So cycle of poverty and poverty trap are interconnected terms. So poverty trap is when you are obviously illiterate and when you're unemployed, so you're getting any income. So you're trapped in your same old situation. You cannot improve your social livings. You cannot improve your social standards. You cannot get basic necessities of life, or you cannot meet your daily needs. So you basically are trapped into a situation of poverty where you cannot improve your living conditions. So that basically is the cycle of poverty. Illiteracy and unemployment also perpetuate the cycle of poverty, where each generation cannot improve the living standards or the living conditions or get out of their poverty if they do not educate themselves or if they're not employed. So you are trapped into a cycle of poverty. Cycle of poverty is perpetuated when 3 or more generations live in that poverty situation and nobody's getting employed, nobody's getting educated. So obviously that cycle of poverty gets perpetuated and you live in a poverty trap at the end of the day. You see that you have a culture of poverty over here as well. So why do poor people remain poor? So there are different explanations that sociologists have given. So first of all, like I've said, they're having lower levels of literacy, being unable to plan for their future, they desire immediate gratification rather than deferred gratification. So immediate gratification is that you don't want to spend of getting good education, you just want to start working. And obviously you cannot earn so much and by basically getting 13 years of education and then working, because you'll get the double that you're getting now after being educated. And then there is fatalism. Fatalism is your own belief that you cannot do much. Okay, I am a laborer's child, so I'll also end up being a laborer. That is fatalistic attitude. Okay, so in order to eliminate poverty, increasing levels of poverty, in order to curb unemployment and illiteracy, the idea of welfare states became very prominent in the 20th century, and welfare states are the ones who are really committed to the general well-being of the citizens. And welfare states are literally providing you aid. If you're unemployed, they'll provide you aid so that you can meet your daily needs every day. But there are different supports and criticism. Obviously, support is that the person is not dragged down below the poverty line and they do not become absolutely poor where they have to die or they have to steal things. So they say in welfare states you get aid at least for your survival so that you can fulfill your basic needs, and then afterwards you can also search for a job. So there are certain criticisms as well that come from right-wing thinkers who say that no, welfare states giving welfare to these citizens or these people who are not working is not so good, because they become dependent on the state and they will not search for a job on their own, for example. And they say that because, for example, if a person is getting aid from the state every time, so they will not be motivated to look for the job, to search for a job, because at the end of the day they're getting aid and their basic needs are being fulfilled. So why would they even work hard and look for a job? So for right-wing thinkers, welfare states is not a good idea because they make the citizen more dependent on the state and they perpetuate the poverty cycle. Okay, so now we move on to how is social class defined. So in this topic, we see that sociologists have come to the conclusion that social class is a very important factor that determines your social standing in the society. And we all know that living in the age of capitalism, money and your economic position are the one that are determining your life chances or your living standards in the society. So for functionalists, how is social class defined and how the differences in social class defined? For functionalists, these differences are natural. And the system in itself is fair. It's meritocratic. So they believe that everyone is given a similar equality of opportunity, and it all depends on hard work. And if somebody does more hard work, then obviously they're going to land at a better position than the other person who does not do hard work. And for them, the idea that all differences are natural, it's because all differences are natural and all differences should be over here. There should be a class difference over here, because then the society cannot function if everybody has the same status. And what's the proof that they give to justify their claim? For example, they say if everybody is going to have a similar status, then we will have no one to, for example, collect our garbage. the society functions on the basis of difference, on the basis of stratification. So there are people who become leaders, there are people who become managers, who become teachers, and there are people also who will become garbage collectors over here, or the people who are going to become carpenters. So this is how your society is going to function, because there are going to be a variety of roles for everyone to take on the basis of a stratified system. Okay, so for Marx, people are divided on the basis of two social classes, which include the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Bourgeoisie are the one who belong to the elite class, who are the owners of big factories, and the proletariat are the one who belong to the working class, who work as laborers in these factories. So according to Marxists, these two classes are going to come in conflict with each other. Why? Because the bourgeoisie are the one who are exploiting and manipulating the working class by giving them low wages or poor working conditions, or by not listening to their needs, and they're basically forced to work more and they're not given equal wages. So the capitalist system exploits them day by day. So he believed that there's going to be a time where the proletariat are going to revolt against the bourgeoisie for all the injustice that they have done. Because in such a system, in such a capitalistic system, because of this class conflict or class clash, the richer is becoming richer and the poorer is becoming poorer. So this system is full of inequality. Lumpen proletariat emerges. Like I said, that this system functions on the basis of inequality. So lumpen proletariat is when inequality is going to be at its climax. Another class is going to emerge that is going to be even below than the proletariat, that is the lumpen proletariat, and they are going to be beggars who cannot even fulfill their basic necessities of life, so they'll be forced to beg from other people. That is the lumpen proletariat. This is going to be another class, and we see that emerging in our society as well. People living in slums, people begging on streets or at signals. So you see that lumpen proletariat class. And then you have another class, that is the proletarization. So with this system, there's going to be another class, which is when lower levels of middle class are now working class. When the middle class when people who belong to the lower levels of middle class are going to be pushed to the working class. The system, because of this inequality, they're going to be further pushed into to the working class, because they're not given equal wages, or they're not given welfare, they're not given social benefits, so they'll be forced to the working class. Okay, so Weber is another sociologist who basically disagreed with Marx and also agreed with Marx to a certain extent. So he says that stratification, social stratification in the society is not only on the basis of class. There are other factors too on the basis of which people are stratified. So obviously there is class. There is a clash between working class and the elite class. But he said that like Marx has only identified two classes, there is another class as well who's going to emerge after the capitalism and these bureaucratic institutions, that is the middle class. So there's going to be three classes, the upper class, middle class, and the working class, who are going to be in conflict with each other. And that conflict is not going to be based on the idea of class only. There's going to be party stratification as well and status stratification as well. For example, I like to give you a status stratification example. So people who may not be economically rich, but they're stratified because of their social standing in the society. For example, you see religious scholars who may not, or Sufi scholars who may not have these big factories, who do not own these big factories, or they do not have these, who may not be economically as rich, but because of their scholarly work, they're going to be respected in the society and occupy a higher position, a higher status in the society. Okay, so for feminism, conflicts is between genders, that is between the male and the female. And they're the ones who believe that women occupy an inferior position than men in the society. Why? Because, like I said, it's because of the triple and the double burden. So what do we mean by double burden? So double burden is when the women have, for example, when women who are working, they have to go out and work. This is one burden. And when they come home, they also have to do household chores. So this is the second burden. So for men, they're only expected to play the role of the breadwinner. They're not expected to do household chores or attend to children 24/7. But for women, if they're working, then they have to go out, do work, and also come home and also do work. So, and another idea that sociologists came, how women are discriminated. is through the triple burden. When women go out and work as wage laborers, when they come home and do household chores, for example, cooking, cleaning, looking after children. And third, when she emotionally takes care of her family, when she listens to her husband's problem, to her children's problem, or to other family members, or to the problems of the other family members. So because of this, she suffers from a triple burden where she has to go out and work, come home and do two different kinds of work. That is emotional care, and also household work. Lastly, we'll explore two different concepts. That is, why is it difficult to measure class? And secondly, what are the factors that determine social class? So there is wealth, occupation, housing, level of education, lifestyle, and status. And why is it difficult? So these factors determine a person's social standing or social class or their social class in the society. But why is it difficult to measure someone's class in the society? So there are different problems with this idea. So there are different problems of measuring class. For example, one of the problem is that you cannot absolutely measure that a person belongs to the elite class or to the working class, because later in their lifetime they may experience upward mobility. They may experience even downward mobility. So they can move from working class to upper class, or they can move from upper class to middle class and then to working class. So this is one of the problems that sociologists see, that you cannot exactly mirror that one person may always, you cannot exactly or absolutely mirror a person's social class. And secondly, while carrying out the research, the researchers may miss out on people who don't work for long term, and also people who don't need to work. For example, people who are very rich and they're not working. And then sociologists may not also, so this is very tricky. So sociologists may not know that there are going to be different sources of income, not just one. So one occupation does not show a clear picture. If a person is working as a manager in a factory, then there can be other different types of earning modes of so there can be other different modes of income for them as well, and you may not know. So you're only taking that one occupation into account while measuring their class. So that can be problematic. So one problem, like I said, is when people may experience upward or downward mobility. Second is that you may not know that there can be several different modes of income, and then you may not even take into account people who are not working on the basis of occupation. I'm talking that who may not be working, who are rich and they're sitting home and they're well off, so they don't need to earn. Okay, so this brings me to the end of this chapter. And if there are any questions, if there is any feedback, both negative and positive, then feel free to comment down below. And please subscribe to my channels. So I'll say this again because this gives me a lot of motivation to continue with these series. And yeah, so thank you for listening and bearing with me.